The bedroom door slammed open with such force that the handle left a dent in the wall. Clara, 13 years old, looked up from her homework to see her mother Veronica standing in the doorway, her face twisted in disgust. Behind her, Letitia, 11 years old, wore a smile that made Clara's stomach turn. It was the smile of someone who had won something they didn't deserve. "Pack your things," Veronica said, her voice flat and cold. "You're switching rooms with your sister." Clara blinked, not understanding at first. This was her room, the spacious one with the large window that let in morning light, the one with the built-in bookshelf and enough space for her desk and bed without feeling cramped. She had lived here since they moved into this house 5 years ago. "What do you mean?" Clara asked, her voice small. Veronica pointed toward the hallway where cardboard boxes were already stacked. "Letitia is getting this room. You're moving to the back room." The back room. Clara felt her chest tighten. That tiny space at the end of the hall with barely any natural light, more like a storage closet than a bedroom. The room where they kept old furniture and boxes of things nobody wanted. "But Mom, why?" The question came out desperate, pleading. Veronica walked further into the room, her eyes scanning the space as if already redecorating it in her mind. She didn't look at Clara when she answered. "Because your sister is beautiful and deserves the best. You took after your father. Be grateful you have a roof over your head at all." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She felt tears burning in her eyes but refused to let them fall. Not in front of Letitia, who was already walking around the room touching Clara's things as if they were already hers. That night, Clara moved her belongings into the cramped back room. Nobody helped her. She made trip after trip down the hallway, carrying boxes and bags while Letitia redecorated what had been Clara's sanctuary. Veronica supervised Letitia's room arrangement, laughing and offering suggestions, never once glancing toward the back of the house where Clara was trying to fit her entire life into a space half the size. The years that followed established a pattern that became Clara's normal, even though it never stopped hurting. Letitia received brand new clothes from expensive stores. Clara got hand-me-downs and clearance items. When Letitia wanted dance lessons, Veronica enrolled her immediately. When Clara asked for art supplies for a school project, Veronica handed her a 20 and told her to make it work. At 15, Clara started working at a convenience store owned by Mr. Augusto, a quiet man in his 60s who never asked too many questions. She needed money for school supplies, for clothes that actually fit, for anything beyond the bare minimum. Veronica signed the work permit without comment, barely glancing at the paperwork. The store became Clara's refuge. Mr. Augusto was kind in a gruff, practical way. He taught her how to manage inventory, how to handle difficult customers, how to count the register. He paid her fairly and sometimes slipped her extra when business was good. He never asked why a 15-year-old needed to work so desperately, but Clara suspected he knew. One evening, during Letitia's birthday party, the house was filled with guests, expensive decorations, and a catering service that Veronica had hired, despite complaining about money whenever Clara asked for anything. Clara had been instructed to stay in her room during the celebration, to not embarrass the family with her presence. She was sitting on her narrow bed, trying to study for a chemistry exam, when someone knocked softly on her door. Aunt Marisa, Veronica's older sister, slipped inside. She looked around the cramped room with sad eyes. "This is where she put you?" Marisa asked quietly. Clara shrugged, not trusting herself to speak. Marisa sat on the edge of the bed, the only place to sit besides the small desk chair. She took Clara's hand and spoke in a whisper, as if afraid Veronica might hear. "Don't let your mother destroy you. You're stronger than you know. You're smarter than Letitia will ever be. And you have something she doesn't." "What's that?" Clara asked, her voice hollow. "Survival instinct. The ability to build something from nothing. She's going to need you one day, and you'll remember this moment. Remember that you owe her nothing." Marisa squeezed her hand and left before Veronica could notice her absence from the party. Those words stayed with Clara through the next 3 years. She worked every shift Mr. Augusto would give her. She studied late into the night in her cramped room. She applied for scholarships in universities far away, places where nobody knew her family, where she could start fresh. When the acceptance letter arrived from a university 3 states away, offering a full scholarship, Clara held the envelope in trembling hands. She had done it. She had found her way out. Veronica barely reacted when Clara told her. She was too busy planning Letitia's upcoming quinceañera, a lavish party that would cost more than Clara's entire education. "That's nice," Veronica said absently, not looking up from the event planner's portfolio. "Make sure you don't leave a mess in that back room when you go." The day Clara left, she packed her few possessions into an old suitcase she had bought at a thrift store. She walked through the house one last time, but it had never felt like home anyway. Letitia was still asleep. Veronica was on the phone arguing with the caterer about centerpieces. Clara walked out the front door and nobody noticed. The walk to the bus station was longer than she expected, especially carrying the heavy suitcase in the summer heat. She was sweating and exhausted, wondering if she had enough money for a taxi, when a familiar car pulled up beside her. Mr. Augusto rolled down the window. "Where do you think you're going on foot with that suitcase?" "The bus station," Clara said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Get in, I'll drive you." During the drive, they didn't talk much. Mr. Augusto had never been one for unnecessary conversation. But when they reached the station, he handed her an envelope. "What's this?" Clara asked. "Bonus for your years of work. You were the best employee I ever had. Use it to start your new life right." Clara opened the envelope and gasped. There was more money than she had earned in the last 6 months combined. "Mr. Augusto, I can't." "You can and you will. You're going to do great things, Clara. Don't let anyone tell you different." She hugged him tight, crying for the first time in years, and then boarded the bus that would take her away from everything she had known. University was harder than Clara expected, but in different ways. The academics came easily. She had always been smart, and now she finally had resources and teachers who noticed. But the social aspects were confusing. Her roommate, Raquel, was loud and energetic, always inviting Clara to parties and study groups. Raquel came from a poor family, but they called her constantly, sent care packages, visited on weekends. "Why don't you ever call home?" Raquel asked one evening as she video chatted with her mother. "Because I don't have a home to call," Clara answered. Raquel didn't understand. She kept insisting that family was family, that blood mattered, that Clara should reach out during holidays. Clara eventually stopped trying to explain. Some people couldn't imagine a mother who didn't love her child. Clara had lived it. She worked nights at a restaurant near campus, serving tables and cleaning up after the late-night crowd. She studied in the early morning hours when the dorm was quiet. She slept in short bursts between obligations. Her grades were perfect, but she was exhausted constantly. Professor Beatriz, who taught her business administration course, called Clara to her office one afternoon. Clara went nervously, wondering if she had done something wrong despite her high marks. "Sit down, Clara," Professor Beatriz said, gesturing to a chair. "I've been watching your work this semester. You have something special, business instinct. You see problems and immediately think of solutions. Have you ever considered entrepreneurship?" Clara had never considered much beyond surviving and getting her degree. "I don't have money to start a business." Neither did I when I started. Neither do most successful entrepreneurs. But you have something more valuable. You have the hunger for it. Think about it. The conversation planted something in Clara's mind that grew slowly over the following months. She started paying attention differently, noticing gaps in the market, inefficiencies in systems, opportunities that others overlooked. In her 3rd year, she met Eduardo in a cross-disciplinary project. He was a technology student, quiet and focused, with the kind of intense concentration that Clara recognized in herself. They were paired together to create a presentation on emerging technologies in business. During their first meeting, Eduardo mentioned he had been working on an app idea, personal finance management, but different. "Most apps just track spending. I want to create something that learns from user behavior, predicts expenses, gamifies saving. But I don't understand the business side." Clara leaned forward. "Tell me more." They started meeting regularly, long sessions after their other obligations, working on Eduardo's laptop that froze constantly and had a cracked screen. Clara mapped out the business model while Eduardo coded. They argued frequently about features and priorities, but they worked well together. Both of them understood what it meant to build something from nothing. The first year was discouraging. They entered pitch competitions and got rejected. Their prototype crashed during a demo for potential investors. They ran out of money twice and had to take on extra work shifts to fund the development. Raquel graduated and moved away for a job opportunity. Before she left, she hugged Clara tight. "You're going to make it," Raquel said, crying. "I know you will. Just don't forget me when you're rich and famous." Clara laughed, but she didn't really believe it would happen. Success felt like something that happened to other people who had families that supported them and safety nets and connections. Then they met Roberto Andrade at a startup fair. He was a legendary investor who had built and lost and rebuilt a fortune. He listened to their pitch with an expressionless face, while other investors had walked away after 30 seconds. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You two remind me of myself 20 years ago," he finally said. "Hungry, smart, probably too stubborn for your own good. I'll invest, but on one condition. You do exactly what I tell you for the first 6 months. After that, if you're still standing, it's your company to run." Those 6 months were brutal. Roberto pushed them harder than Clara had ever been pushed. He made them rebuild the entire user interface 3 times. He made them pivot their marketing strategy completely. He introduced them to people who could help and people who tried to steal their ideas. He taught them to trust their instincts but verify everything. The app, Control Acerto, launched on a small scale. Then it started growing. The gamification aspect caught on quickly. People liked earning points for saving money, competing with friends on financial goals, getting AI-powered insights into their spending patterns. Within a year, they had 1 million users. Within 2 years, they expanded to business services. Clara was 27 when a major financial magazine put her on the cover as one of the year's most promising young CEOs. The company was valued at several $100 million. She bought an apartment in a good neighborhood, spacious and filled with light. She could afford anything she wanted now, but she found she didn't want much. The hunger that had driven her hadn't been about money. It had been about proving something, though she was no longer sure to whom. Eduardo got married to a woman he met at a conference. They had a baby boy, and Eduardo asked Clara to be the godmother. At the baptism, holding the tiny baby in her arms, Clara felt something crack inside her chest. Not pain, exactly, but an awareness of absence. She had succeeded in every way that mattered professionally, but personally, she was alone. Throughout all of this, Clara never contacted her family. Veronica tried calling in the first year, leaving voicemails that started apologetic and ended accusatory. Clara blocked the number. Through mutual acquaintances and social media, she heard occasional updates. Letitia was working as a receptionist at a medical clinic. She still lived with Veronica. The house they had grown up in had been refinanced twice. Clara felt nothing when she heard these things. Not satisfaction, not sympathy, nothing. They were strangers to her now, characters in a story she had left behind. Then, 2 weeks after her 29th birthday, an envelope arrived at her office. Inside was a wedding invitation. Letitia was getting married to someone named Mauricio, who worked as an accountant. The invitation was formal and generic, the kind bought in bulk from a stationery store. But tucked inside was a handwritten note on plain paper. "I know we haven't been close. I know I don't deserve to ask this, but you're my only sister, and it would mean everything to me if you came. I understand if you can't, but I hope you will. Letitia." Clara held the note for a long time, reading it over and over. Her first instinct was to throw it away. What did she owe Letitia? The girl had watched their mother destroy Clara and had said nothing, had enjoyed the preferential treatment, had been complicit in the cruelty even if she had only been a child. But Eduardo said something that made her reconsider. They were having lunch in the company cafeteria when Clara mentioned the invitation. "Are you going to go?" Eduardo asked. "Why would I?" "Maybe you need to. Not for them, for yourself. To really close that chapter instead of just running from it." Clara thought about this for days. She imagined going to the wedding, imagined seeing Veronica and Letitia again after all these years. The thought made her feel nothing, and that nothingness bothered her more than anger would have. Finally, she made a decision. She would go, but on her terms. She bought a new Mercedes, red and impossible to ignore. She chose an elegant dress, expensive but tasteful, with shoes that cost more than 3 months of rent in that back room. She asked Sylvia, her executive assistant, to accompany her. "If I give you a signal, we leave immediately," Clara instructed. "No arguments, no explanations, we just go." Sylvia, who knew Clara's history, nodded. Understood. The wedding was at a modest banquet hall. Clara arrived deliberately late after the ceremony had finished, and guests were mingling during the cocktail hour. The red Mercedes pulled up to the entrance, and every head turned to see who was arriving in such a vehicle for such a modest affair. Clara stepped out, and there was a moment of complete silence before the whispers started. She looked different now, confident, polished, unmistakably successful. She walked into the hall with Sylvia beside her, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Aunt Marisa saw her first. The old woman's eyes filled with tears as she made her way through the crowd. She hugged Clara without asking permission, holding her tight. "I knew it," Marisa whispered. "I always knew you'd fly high. Look at you now. Thank you for being kind when nobody else was," Clara said quietly. Before they could talk more, Veronica came rushing across the hall. She looked older, with lines in her face that hadn't been there before, and gray hair poorly covered with dye. She wore a dress that had probably been expensive once but was outdated now. Her arms opened wide for a hug, her face transforming into an expression of joy that looked grotesque and false. "My daughter, you came. You look so beautiful, so successful. Let me hug you." Clara took a step back, maintaining distance. Her face was a perfect composition of polite indifference. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost gentle, but with a coldness that made people nearby stop talking. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Veronica's smile crumbled. The guests around them fell silent, sensing drama. "Clara, don't joke like that. It's me, your mother." Her voice was trembling now, pleading. Clara tilted her head slightly, as if trying to remember something from very far away. "Oh, of course. The woman who told me I was ugly and didn't deserve anything. Forgive me, I get confused. You used to treat me like I was invisible, so you'll understand if I return the favor." The silence in the hall was absolute now. People were staring openly. Letitia emerged from the crowd near the dessert table, her face pale, her mouth open in shock. She was wearing a wedding dress that was pretty but clearly not expensive, the kind bought on a budget. "Clara," Letitia said, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "I invited you. I wanted you here." Clara finally looked at her sister. There was no anger in her eyes, just exhaustion. "I came, Letitia. I came because you asked, and because I needed to see if I still felt anything. I discovered I don't." She pulled an envelope from her purse and handed it to the bride. "My gift. Use it to start a life away from this woman. That's advice from your older sister." Letitia opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check for an amount that made her gasp and a business card for a headhunter who worked with Clara's company. Tears started falling down Letitia's face, smudging her makeup. "You didn't have to do this," Letitia whispered. Clara raised her hand, stopping her. "I didn't need a lot of things when I was a child either, but I had to learn to survive alone. I hope you use this better than she used her life." Veronica tried to grab Clara's arm, but Clara moved away smoothly, as if she had anticipated it. "Please, I'm so sorry. I was wrong about everything. Can you forgive me?" Clara stopped at the entrance to the hall and looked back one last time. Her voice carried across the silent room. "Forgiveness is for people who deserve a second chance. You had years to be a mother. You chose not to be. Now it's too late to pretend you care about the daughter you despised." She walked out, Sylvia following close behind. They got into the Mercedes and drove away as people gathered in the doorway to watch them leave. Inside the car, Sylvia waited a moment before asking, "How do you feel?" Clara looked out the window, watching the banquet hall disappear behind them. Empty and free. Maybe they're the same thing. They drove in silence until Clara asked Sylvia to stop at a park she used to visit as a child, back when she could still escape the house and pretend she had a normal life. Clara sat on a bench while Sylvia stood a respectful distance away, giving her space. On that bench, looking at the trees she had climbed as a little girl trying to get away from everything, Clara realized something important. The revenge hadn't brought satisfaction. There was no victory in rejecting someone who had rejected you first. There was only the emptiness where love should have been. She pulled out her phone and called Eduardo. Was I right, or were you right? He sighed on the other end. Neither of us. Some wounds don't heal just because you confront them. Clara hung up and watched the sky darken. She had thought closure would feel different. She had imagined it would feel like winning. Instead, it just felt like the end of something that should never have started. 3 weeks later, Letitia appeared at the company's main office. The receptionist called Clara's assistant, uncertain whether to allow the visit. Clara surprised herself by saying yes. They sat in an empty conference room, neither quite sure how to begin. Letitia looked different, more serious, like someone who had been thinking hard about things. I used your gift, Letitia said. I applied for the position your headhunter suggested. They called me for an interview next week. Clara nodded, but said nothing. And our mother? Clara asked. How did she react? Letitia laughed without humor. She cried for days. Said she lost everything. I told her she never had you to begin with. Clara stood up, indicating the conversation was over. But Letitia spoke before she could leave. I know I can't fix the past. I know I was complicit in how she treated you, even though I was just a child. But if you ever want to try, not a family, but maybe a friendship, I'm here. I'll wait as long as it takes. Clara didn't respond. She just walked out of the conference room, leaving Letitia sitting alone at the large table. 6 months passed. Clara expanded the company internationally, opening offices on 2 different continents. The work consumed her, which was fine because she didn't know what else to do with herself. Eduardo had his family. Raquel had moved on with her life. Clara had her company, her apartment, her success, and the echoing silence that came with all of it. She was in a meeting with international investors, negotiating a deal that would double the company's valuation, when her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Letitia. Clara glanced at it discreetly under the table. It was a photo of Letitia in an office, wearing professional clothes, smiling genuinely. The caption read simply, "First day, thank you." Clara looked at the photo for a long moment. Letitia looked happy in a way Clara didn't remember ever seeing her. Not the shallow happiness of getting new clothes or being the favorite child, but the deeper satisfaction of earning something yourself. Clara archived the message without responding. She didn't delete it, but she didn't reply either. She turned her attention back to the investors and the contracts spread across the table. Eduardo noticed her distraction during a break in the meeting. Everything okay? Clara put her phone away. I'm exactly where I need to be. It wasn't just a defense mechanism this time. It was true. She had built a life where nobody could tell her she didn't deserve to be there. The price had been steep, and the loneliness was sometimes overwhelming, but it was hers. Completely hers. The meeting ended with a signed contract and handshakes all around. That evening, Clara ate dinner alone in her apartment, looking out at the city lights. She thought about Letitia's message, about Veronica's tears at the wedding, about Aunt Marissa's proud smile, about Mr. Augusto's envelope full of money, about Roberto Andrade's tough lessons, about Eduardo's family that actually loved each other. She thought about the back room where she had spent years of her childhood, cramped and dark, and about this apartment where she lived now, spacious and bright. She had escaped. She had won, if winning was measured in money and success, and the ability to reject the people who had rejected you. But sitting there in the expensive apartment, eating takeout from a container because she never learned to cook proper meals, Clara wondered if escape and winning were actually the same thing. She wondered if the emptiness she felt was freedom or just another kind of prison, one she had built herself this time. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Letitia. Clara almost ignored it, but curiosity made her open it. I know you probably won't respond, but I got the job. I start next month. Mauricio and I are moving to our own place, using the rest of your gift for the deposit. Mom doesn't know yet. I'm scared to tell her, but I wanted you to know that you changed my life, not just with the money, but with showing me that it's possible to break free. I'm sorry I wasn't brave like you when we were kids. I'm trying to be brave now. Your sister, Letitia. Clara read the message 3 times. She thought about responding, about offering advice or encouragement or anything, but the words wouldn't come. She wasn't ready yet, maybe would never be ready, to let these people back into her life, even in the smallest way. She archived this message too, next to the first one. A collection of attempts at connection that she couldn't quite bring herself to accept or reject completely. The next morning, Clara was back at work before sunrise. There were deals to close, investors to meet, employees to manage, problems to solve. The company needed her, and she poured herself into it the way she always had, using work as both purpose and shield. At a board meeting that afternoon, Roberto Andrade pulled her aside. He was mostly retired now, but still held a seat on the board and checked in regularly. "You look tired," he said bluntly. "Not just physically. Something deeper." "I'm fine," Clara said automatically. Roberto shook his head. "I've known you for years now. I've seen you work 70-hour weeks and still have fire in your eyes. That fire is dimming. What happened?" Clara considered brushing him off, but Roberto had earned honesty from her. "I went to my sister's wedding a few months ago. The family you don't talk about. That one. How did it go?" "Exactly how I expected. I rejected my mother publicly. I gave my sister money and a job opportunity. I felt nothing during any of it. And somehow that feeling nothing is worse than if I had felt angry." Roberto was quiet for a moment. "You know what I learned after I lost everything the first time? The thing that helped me rebuild?" "What?" "That revenge and success aren't the same thing. I spent years trying to prove wrong everyone who had counted me out. But that was hollow. I only really started building something meaningful when I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. When I just built, because I wanted to build." "Are you saying I'm doing this for the wrong reasons?" "I'm saying that maybe you need to figure out what the right reasons are. You've proven you can succeed. You've proven your mother was wrong about you. Now what? What do you actually want from this life you've built?" Clara didn't have an answer for him. She went back to her office and stared at the city below for a long time, thinking about his question. What did she want? She had spent so long focused on surviving, on escaping, on succeeding, that she had never really thought about what came after all of that. 2 weeks later, Eduardo invited her to his son's birthday party. Clara almost declined. She didn't do well at family gatherings, even other people's families. But Eduardo insisted, "Come on. Miguel keeps asking about his godmother. Besides, you need to be around actual human beings sometimes instead of just business associates." The party was in Eduardo's backyard, full of children and parents and the kind of casual chaos that Clara found overwhelming. But she went because Eduardo was her oldest friend, maybe her only real friend, and he had asked. She brought an expensive gift that Eduardo's wife diplomatically accepted, while clearly thinking it was too much for a 3-year-old. Clara stood awkwardly by the fence, watching the children play, feeling completely out of place. A woman approached her, one of the other parents. "You're Clara, right? The famous CEO? Eduardo talks about you all the time." "I don't know about famous," Clara said. "He says you built the company from nothing. That's incredible. I can barely manage my household budget, let alone run a financial tech company." They talked for a while, and the woman, whose name was Patricia, was kind and funny. She didn't treat Clara like a celebrity or a success story. She just talked to her like a normal person. It was surprisingly refreshing. As Clara was leaving, Eduardo walked her to her car. "See? That wasn't so bad." "It was fine," Clara admitted. "Your wife thinks I spoil Miguel too much." "You do, but he loves you for it." "Listen, Clara, I know you've been going through something lately. You don't talk about it, but I can tell. Just remember you're allowed to be happy, okay? You don't have to earn it or prove you deserve it. You're allowed to just be happy." Clara drove home thinking about those words. Was she happy? She didn't know. She didn't know what happiness was supposed to feel like. She had been in survival mode for so long that contentment felt foreign. 3 months later, Letitia sent another message. Clara had gotten used to these monthly updates. Always archived, never answered. This one was different, though. "Clara, I know you don't want to talk to me. I understand. But I need to tell you something. Mom is sick. The doctors say it's serious. She's been asking for you. I'm not saying you should come. I'm not saying you owe her anything. But I thought you should know. Letitia." Clara stared at the message for a full minute. Veronica was sick. Her mother, the woman who had told her she was ugly and worthless, who had given her sister everything while Clara got nothing, who had made Clara's childhood a nightmare, was sick and asking for her. She felt nothing. No sympathy, No satisfaction, nothing. Just that same emptiness she had felt at the wedding. She didn't respond to Letitia's message. She didn't call. She didn't visit. She just archived the message with all the others and went on with her life. A month later, another message came. She died yesterday. Funeral is Saturday. I'm not asking you to come. Just thought you should know. There's no one else to tell. Clara read the message during a lunch meeting with potential partners. She excused herself to the bathroom and stood in the pristine stall, staring at her phone. Her mother was dead. The woman who had shaped so much of her life through cruelty and neglect was gone. She waited for some emotion to surface. Grief, relief, anger, anything. But there was nothing. Just empty space where a relationship should have been but never was. She didn't go to the funeral. She sent flowers with no card, an anonymous gesture that felt appropriate. Let them wonder if they were from her or from someone else. Let Veronica be buried with that uncertainty. But 3 days after the funeral, Letitia showed up at Clara's office again. This time, Clara almost refused to see her, but something made her say yes. Letitia looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. She sat across from Clara in the conference room and didn't say anything for a long moment. "You didn't come," Letitia finally said. Not accusing, just stating a fact. "No, I understand why." They sat in silence. Clara waited for Letitia to say whatever she had come to say. "She left a letter for you," Letitia said quietly. "I wasn't sure if I should bring it, but I thought, maybe you should decide for yourself." She pulled an envelope from her bag and placed it on the table. It was addressed to Clara in Veronica's handwriting, shaky and unsteady. Clara looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "What does it say?" "I don't know." She sealed it. "Made me promise to give it to you if anything happened to her." That was 6 months ago, before we knew she was that sick. She had 6 months to give it to me herself. "I know. I think she was too afraid, or too proud, or both." Clara still didn't touch the envelope. "Why did you really come here, Letitia?" Letitia took a deep breath. "Because I'm tired of living with ghosts. Mom is gone, but the damage she did is still here. I've been in therapy for 3 months trying to understand why I let her treat you the way she did. Why I enjoyed being the favorite even when I knew it was wrong. Why I never stood up for you. And what did you learn? That I was a coward. That children can be victims and still cause harm. That knowing something is wrong and doing something about it are two different things. I learned that I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that I wasn't brave enough to be your sister when you needed one." Clara felt something crack inside her chest, a small fissure in the wall she had built around herself. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe never completely, but acknowledgement, recognition that Letitia's pain was real too, even if it was different from her own. "I'm not ready to read that letter," Clara said quietly. "Maybe I never will be. I understand. And I'm not ready to have a relationship with you. I don't know if I ever will be. I understand that too. But," Clara paused, surprised by what she was about to say, "maybe we could have coffee sometime, not as sisters, just as two people who survived the same war." Letitia's eyes filled with tears. "I would like that. Whenever you're ready. I can wait." After Letitia left, Clara sat alone in the conference room, staring at the envelope. She thought about opening it, reading whatever final words Veronica had wanted to say, but she wasn't ready. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. She picked up the envelope and put it in her desk drawer, locked it away. Someday she might read it. Someday she might throw it away unopened. But today, she was going to leave it unopened and go live her life. That evening, Clara did something she hadn't done in years. She called Raquel, her old roommate, the woman who had insisted family was everything and couldn't understand why Clara disagreed. "Clara, oh my God, it's been so long. How are you?" They talked for an hour, catching up on everything. Raquel was engaged now, working as a social worker, still loud and energetic over the phone. She invited Clara to the wedding. "I know it's far, and you're busy, but it would mean so much if you could come. You were my first real friend when I moved for university. I want you there." Clara surprised herself by saying yes, by actually wanting to go. Over the next few months, something shifted in Clara. She started saying yes to things that weren't work-related. She went to Raquel's wedding and danced at the reception, laughing genuinely for the first time in months. She had coffee with Letitia twice, awkward conversations that didn't heal anything but didn't hurt either. She joined Eduardo and his family for dinner regularly, becoming a real part of their lives instead of a distant godmother who sent expensive gifts. She didn't read Veronica's letter. It stayed in her desk drawer, a choice she made actively every time she saw it. Not reading it was its own kind of power, its own form of closure. The company continued to grow. Clara remained CEO but started delegating more, trusting others to carry some of the weight she had been carrying alone for years. She hired a chief operating officer, a brilliant woman named Diana who had her own story of clawing her way to success. One afternoon, Diana asked Clara to mentor her daughter, a teenager who wanted to start her own business someday. Clara met the girl, Andrea, at a coffee shop. Andrea was 15, bright-eyed and full of ideas, with parents who supported her dreams completely. Watching Andrea talk excitedly about her plans, Clara saw herself at that age, but without the hunger born of neglect, without the desperation of someone fighting for survival. This girl had support and love, and still wanted to build something. It was pure ambition, untainted by trauma. "Can I ask you something?" Andrea said. "Everyone says you built your company from nothing. What does that really mean?" Clara thought about how to answer honestly without burdening this child with her history. "It means I had to be my own foundation. I had to believe in myself when nobody else did. I had to keep going when everything said to quit. Did you ever want to quit?" "Every single day for the first 3 years." "What made you keep going?" Clara smiled. "Spite, mostly. And then, eventually, because I realized I was building something I actually cared about, not just proving something to people who didn't matter." She started meeting with Andrea regularly, teaching her about business and entrepreneurship. It felt different from running her company, more personal, more meaningful in a way she couldn't quite articulate. She was giving to this girl what nobody had given to her. Not money or connections, but belief. The simple gift of someone saying, "You can do this," and meaning it. A year after Veronica's death, Clara was featured in another magazine, this time talking about work-life balance and mental health in entrepreneurship. The irony wasn't lost on her, given how imbalanced her own life had been. But she was honest in the interview about the cost of success, about the importance of building support systems, about the difference between running from something and running toward something. The article quoted her saying, "I spent years proving I was worth something to people who never should have had that power over me. Now I build because I want to, because I have ideas I believe in, because I want to create opportunities for people who need them." That shift in motivation changed everything. After the article came out, she got an unexpected call. It was Mr. Augusto, her old boss from the convenience store. He had seen the article and wanted to congratulate her. "I always knew you'd do great things," he said, his voice older now but still warm. "You had that look about you, even at 15, the look of someone who wouldn't let the world break them. You saved me, you know," Clara said. "That job, that envelope you gave me, the way you treated me like I mattered. I've never properly thanked you for that. No thanks needed. I just gave you a chance. You did everything else yourself." They talked for a while longer, and Clara found herself crying after she hung up. The good kind of crying that comes from gratitude. She realized she had been so focused on the people who had hurt her that she had forgotten to properly acknowledge the people who had helped her. Mr. Augusto, Aunt Marisa, Professor Beatrice, Roberto Andrade, Eduardo, Raquel. She had built her life on their kindness as much as on her own determination. That evening, she finally opened the desk drawer and took out Veronica's letter. She held it for a long time, feeling its weight, imagining what might be inside. An apology? An explanation? More cruelty disguised as last words? She took the letter out onto her balcony and sat watching the sunset. Then, slowly, she opened it. The handwriting was shaky, the words clearly written by someone who was very sick. "Clara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. I was cruel to you your entire childhood because I saw your father in you, and I hated him for leaving us. I made you pay for his abandonment. I told myself I was being practical, that Letitia needed more because she was weaker, but that was a lie. The truth is, I was a bitter, broken woman who took out her pain on an innocent child. You were everything I could never be. Smart, resilient, determined. I was jealous of my own daughter. By the time I realized what I had done, you were gone. I watched you become successful and I was proud, but I had no right to that pride. I earned none of it. I just want you to know that my mistakes were never about you. You were always enough. You were always worthy. I was just too damaged to see it. I hope you've built a life full of the love I never gave you. You deserved better than me. Veronica. Clara read the letter twice, then sat watching the sun disappear behind the buildings. The words didn't change anything. They didn't heal the wounds or erase the years of pain, but they did something unexpected. They released her from wondering. She didn't forgive Veronica. She might never forgive her. But she understood finally that Veronica's cruelty had been about Veronica's own brokenness, not about Clara's worth. That understanding didn't erase the damage, but it did shift something inside her. She didn't keep the letter. She burned it carefully in a metal bowl on her balcony, watching the paper curl and blacken. The words stayed with her, but the physical letter became ash, scattered by the wind. It felt right. The next morning, she called Letitia. They had their awkward coffees every few weeks now, slowly building something that wasn't quite friendship, but wasn't hostile either. I read Mom's letter, Clara said. Letitia was quiet for a moment. And nothing. It doesn't change what happened. But I'm done being angry about it. I'm done letting it take up space in my life. Does that mean you forgive her? No. But I'm not carrying her mistakes anymore either. They were hers, not mine. Another silence. Then Letitia said quietly, I wrote you a letter too, years ago, right after your wedding appearance. I never sent it because I was too afraid, but maybe I should have. What did it say? That I was sorry, that I understood if you never wanted to see me again, that I wished I had been braver when we were kids, that I spent years benefiting from Mom's favoritism and never once questioned if it was right, that watching you succeed while I stayed stuck made me realize what real strength looks like. Clara took a deep breath. Letitia, we were children. You were a child. I'm not saying it didn't hurt, because it did, but I'm tired of holding grudges. I'm tired of letting the past eat up my present. So what now? Now we figure out if we can build something new. Not the sister relationship we should have had. We can't get that back. But maybe something honest and real, built on who we actually are now. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. There was no dramatic hug, no sudden rush of sisterly love, but it was real, and it was a beginning. Over the next year, Clara continued building her life deliberately and intentionally. She dated someone for a few months, a relationship that ended amicably when they both realized they wanted different things. She adopted a dog, a rescue who had been through trauma of her own, and understood Clara in ways people sometimes didn't. She started therapy, finally, working through layers of damage she had been carrying for decades. The company grew. Diana became her partner in running it, allowing Clara to focus more on innovation and less on daily operations. They hired more people, including several young women who reminded Clara of herself, hungry and determined and carrying invisible scars. She mentored them fiercely, making sure they knew they belonged. Andrea, the teenager she had been mentoring, launched her first small business at 17. Clara helped her navigate the legal paperwork and connected her with resources. But the success was Andrea's own. Watching her celebrate, surrounded by proud parents and friends, Clara felt something she hadn't felt before. Not jealousy, not bitterness about what she hadn't had. Just pure happiness for this girl who was getting to build her dreams with support and love. 2 years after Veronica's death, Clara and Letitia had dinner at Clara's apartment. It was the first time Letitia had been invited to Clara's space. They cooked together, something neither of them was particularly good at, laughing at their mistakes. Mauricio, Letitia's husband, was kind and funny, clearly adoring his wife. He treated Clara with respect, but not worship, which she appreciated. "This is nice," Letitia said as they ate the slightly burnt meal they had managed to create. "This feels normal, like what sisters should be like." Clara smiled. "We'll never be normal sisters. Too much history, but maybe we can be our own version of it." They talked about their lives, their work, their plans. Letitia was doing well in her job, thriving in ways she never had working at the clinic. She was taking business courses at night, thinking about starting her own practice someday. Clara offered advice and contacts, and Letitia accepted graciously, but insisted on earning her own success. As Letitia and Mauricio were leaving, Letitia hugged Clara. "Thank you for giving me a chance to be better than I was." "Thank you for taking it," Clara replied. After they left, Clara sat on her couch with her dog curled up beside her. She looked around her apartment, at the life she had built, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not empty, not full exactly either, but balanced, content, at peace with where she was and who she had become. She thought about 13-year-old Clara, being told to pack up her room and move to the back of the house, being told she was ugly and worthless. She wished she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, not just the success and the money, but the strength she would develop, the life she would build, the person she would become. But then she realized that girl wouldn't have believed her anyway. That girl had to walk that hard road herself to become who Clara was now. The pain had been real, but it had forged something unbreakable. She wasn't grateful for the suffering, but she was proud of how she had survived it. Her phone buzzed with a message from Eduardo. "Miguel wants to know if his godmother is coming to his recital next week." Clara smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. She had spent so many years alone, by choice and by circumstance. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had built a family from the people who chose to love her, from the connections she had formed through honesty and trust, and showing up even when it was hard. It wasn't the life she had imagined as a child, back when she still believed Veronica might wake up one day and suddenly be a real mother. It was better than that, because it was hers, built by her own hands, filled with people who saw her worth without her having to prove it constantly. She picked up her laptop and opened her email. There was a message from a young woman, someone she didn't know, asking for advice about starting a business with no resources or support. The email was desperate and hopeful all at once, and Clara recognized that tone instantly. She began typing a response, offering to meet for coffee, to share what she had learned, to be for this stranger what Mr. Augusto had been for her all those years ago. A chance, a belief, a hand up when everything felt impossible. Because that was what she had learned, finally, after all the success and all the pain and all the complicated rebuilding, that the point wasn't just to survive. The point was to survive, and then turn around and help the next person climbing that same mountain, to break the cycle of cruelty by choosing kindness, to build something better than what she had been given. She finished the email and sent it. Then she closed her laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed in her spacious, light-filled bedroom. The back room was thousands of miles and years away. She had escaped. She had won. But more than that, she had learned to live. And in the morning, she would wake up and keep building, not to prove anything to anyone anymore, just because she could, just because she wanted to, just because the life she had fought so hard for was finally, truly her own.